Hi, everyone, and welcome to How to Negotiate Friendships While Grieving. I have a few people just entering the waiting room here, admitting as we go. Let's see, here we go. Folks coming in, wonderful. Excellent. Hi, everybody, welcome. Today is a very special day in the world, in my world. In the world. I'm talking like it's a national holiday. But feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know where you are watching from. Would love to hear from you, and I'll be putting some resources there as we go along for the workshop tonight. But like I said at the beginning, this is a very special day in my world because it is the 5-year anniversary to the day of when my book Your Grief Your Way came out into the world. So as we have folks coming in, entering the waiting room, all that jazz, I thought I would do a little bonus here at the beginning while we're waiting for folks to trickle in and read the September 29th entry from Your Grief Your Way. And this is my second book on grief and loss. It is a non-religious daily devotional for life after someone that you love dies. And this was a project that I was approached to write by Penguin Random House because they were essentially like, we like the idea of a daily devotional for grief. We do not want it to be religious because a lot of grief devotionals are spiritual or religious or related to Bible verses or meditations or like Zen koans or things like that. And a lot of that is inaccessible to people who are grieving because suffice it to say, sometimes your relationship with God gets a little sticky after somebody you love dies. And so they're like, we want practical, we want non-religious, and we want it to be so short that anybody can pick it up and just rifle through. That's an entry, that's an entry, that's an entry, that's an entry. They're so short. So you can get some wisdom kind of anywhere you go. You can pick your loved one's birthday, death anniversary, another significant date that's important to you, and you will find something in this book that resonates with you. And so it has been just one of the joys of my life to see this be out in the world. So this is the September 29th entry from Your Grief Your Way. And it is a quote. It says, "When we lose people we love, we don't mourn the past. We mourn unlived tomorrows. We mourn the loss of people who knew us thoroughly and loved us anyway, and future memories that will never be made." And that's a quote from James Russell Lingerfeld. And the section, the paragraph that comes underneath this that says, "I'll admit it. It's hard to create, build, and maintain relationships with people who know all sides of you and love you anyway. Not everyone in your circle is your quote person. And when you lose someone, especially your person, it can feel like you'll never have another person ever again. There is grief for their life, absolutely, but there is also grief for the deep, intimate connection the two of you shared. Your relationship was special, and that's worth grieving." And a lot of this resonates with what we're talking about tonight, and I did not do this on purpose. But a lot of what we grieve in life after loss is not just my person died. It is who that person was to you in all the ways they showed up to you, whether as a friend, as a partner, as a relative, as a neighbor, as a coworker, all of the ways that they appeared or had some sort of presence in your life. And so that's a very appropriate reading for an evening where we are doing a workshop on friendships. Erin says, "Good evening, tuning in from North Carolina." Yes, please continue to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from. And we are 3 minutes after the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. And of course, if you have to drop off early, the replay is being sent to your email inboxes within 24 hours. So sometime tomorrow you will get the replay of this, and it should be like a little YouTube link that you can watch. I think 30 days after this workshop ends is how that works. So before we get going, I want to say thank you so much to Reimagine End of Life for allowing me to partner with them for this workshop. This is one of my all-time, I say bestsellers, most popular workshops to lead. Everyone wants to know how to have different or better or improved relationships after a loss because they're like, my friends are saying stupid things. My family members have like gone back to their normal lives and now are ignoring my loss entirely. My coworkers said sorry once and then like don't know what to say to me going forward, and it just feels really strained and awkward and weird. And I don't know what to do with that. And it's a shame that I, as the grieving person, have to be the teacher of what to do with my grief. But sometimes that burden does fall to us. And so, what do you do with that? How do you negotiate friendships after loss? And Reimagine is just one of my favorite organizations to lead with because of their inclusivity, their perspective on grief and loss, and their willingness to include voices from all grieving people. That being said, I'm going to keep everybody on mute as I go through the presentation. And then if you could drop questions or insights or thoughts into the chat, I would love to hear from you as we go along. And I'll be reading off the chat as a bit of a Q&A here at the end. And so if you have sparks that come up, drop them in the chat. If you have questions that you'd like me to answer, I love helping you develop scripts to use in your real life with your real friends and family members and see how you go. And of course, I will offer the caveat that I have been a grief coach since 2016. So I'm going on 9 years now, 8 years, 9 years now. But I don't know everything there is to know about grief and loss. And so if there is something that you would like to correct me on or add more information to, please do that in the chat as well, because just like no two griefs are alike, no two grief coaches are alike either. And so I can't possibly know everything there is to know about grief and loss, and love hearing from you and your perspective as we go along. The last thing I'll say is, as people are sharing things in the chat, please do not recommend advice or suggestions unless they explicitly ask for it. That's one of my favorite things that the grief support subreddit does over on reddit.com, is people will explicitly say asking for advice as a little tag if they're asking for advice. So if someone's not asking for advice, if they're looking to vent or to share a story or to share a perspective, don't recommend a book or a website or an herbal treatment or whatever the case may be, because as grievers, we know that that's not the best response to grief. But to see other people, to acknowledge their pain, to witness their relationship to their person, that is a sacred thing that we can all do and participate in this space. So those are the commitments I'm making to you at the top of this workshop. And let's get going with how to negotiate friendships while grieving. I will check back in the chat. Can you all see this screen right now? That's green and has my cute little face on it from when I did headshots last year. Okay, great. Thank you, Rachel. I see your little thumbs up. Awesome. I'm going to go full screen here. So welcome, welcome, welcome to How to Negotiate Friendships While Grieving. What you will learn here tonight is my 5-step framework that helps you turn relationships that feel awkward and painful into relationships that honor your grief. And this is fully transparently one module of the online course that I teach called Life After Loss Academy that I often present publicly because as a topic, it is one of the most popular things that we talk about when it comes to life after loss. And something that's really significant is that we don't talk about publicly how grief changes our friendships, our relationships with the people in our lives, but it does. Grief, I often say, is kind of a relationship game changer. It changes the terms of our relationships with other people. It is something that affects every single aspect of our lives, and we don't grieve in a vacuum. We don't grieve just like on a little planet by ourselves. For as much as it feels like it, we are surrounded by friends, by family members, by other people in the world, by helping professionals. We are surrounded by other humans as we are going through our grief. And that is something that's really significant. And something that so many of my clients and students have come to me with over the years is that friends and family that I thought would be there for me are not supportive. Some people have said, pardon my French, shitty or awful things. And some of them, shockingly, have disappeared off the grid entirely. And I don't know what I did. As a grieving person, I don't know what I did to make them leave my life. I just know that I am heartbroken, and I know the only thing that's different is that I've now experienced a loss. Something that I believe as a grief coach is that you deserve friendships and relationships that support you through loss. So many people say that they feel judged or dismissed or abandoned or bright-sided, like cheerleaded through their grief, or analyzed or criticized for how they're grieving, when what I believe that you deserve, and I think what you know you deserve on some level, are relationships that help you feel welcomed and nourished and seen and witnessed and loved, because that is friendship through all of life's many iterations. That is what it means to be a true friend instead of what many people would call like a fair weather friend, I suppose. And when you are grieving, supportive friendships are the difference. They make the difference between feeling isolated, like you are grieving on your own tiny little grief planet, like you don't have a friend in the world, and feeling safe and heard and understood and compassionately held as you grieve. Even just notice the change in the register of my voice as I'm talking about the difference between like I don't have a friend in the world to feeling safe and heard and understood and loved as you grieve. Where does my experience come from? For more than 10 years, if you don't know my story, my mom died suddenly when I was in college. I was 21 years old, from breast cancer that came back and just, we were told she had 6 weeks to 6 months, and she died in 7 days, and my life changed from that moment on, as I imagine so many of yours have. And for the past 10 years, and now her 12th death anniversary is coming up, I have been cultivating rich and meaningful friendships that not only support and honor my grief, but see me as a whole person. And grief is very much a part of that. And so these are pictures of me and some of my friends through the years. And I have also had the honor in Life After Loss Academy of helping hundreds of other people do the same. I'm not going to read through all these testimonials, but people are saying they helped grow their friendship with grief, to set boundaries with people who didn't understand, protected themselves from coworkers or managers who were not willing to sort of see their grief in the workplace, and to come home to themselves, to really feel as if they are aligned with the decisions that they're making when it comes to the relationships that are in their lives. And the other kind of side effect, byproduct of being in Life After Loss Academy is that you get to connect with other people who are grieving. So a lot of people have formed new friendships as a result of coming to my work and talking about broken friendships or fractured friendships. They end up meeting other people who are or can be very good friends to them in grief. And the thing I love doing the most and the work I do in the world is helping people build lives they love from the lives that loss forced them to live. And that includes building friendships that support them in grief. So Lori was grieving her daughter's suicide. She said, I have learned to live with grief as a friend. Tammy was grieving a divorce and an empty nest. As many of you know, I work with death-related losses and non-death-related losses. So divorce, empty nest, estrangement, breakup, major diagnosis, geographic move, all these big things that change your life. I count them all as loss events. She said, I have put my broken heart back together. And Julia's dad died right before COVID, and her mom was declining from dementia during COVID, which was really devastating. She was in a nursing home, and she says, I have taken my power back in so many facets. And she was one of these people I was referring to who had work troubles as a result of grief. Her managers did not respect the fact that she was grieving in the workplace, and she set some boundaries with that, and it ended up really changing her life, and I loved working with her. So, the practical method that I'm going to teach you tonight is what I call the green method, Green. I can't help myself. I like things that spell things. And especially when you have grief brain, it's very, very helpful to remember something that spells something else. And I know I'm working with a bunch of grievers here tonight, and I'm a griever myself, and I don't like things that I can't remember or pull out of my head easily. So if you want to have a piece of paper, a journal, write this down, all that jazz, you can. Again, you'll get the replay tomorrow. But the method that you're going to learn tonight that I'm going to teach is called the green method, Green. And what we'll do is I'm going to go through the method step by step and give you all of the information. And then I'm going to give you an example of how it works in real life, just so you can see, like, here's the step by step, and then here's a practical example. So you can see both layers of how it works, like kind of the technical and then the application in real life. And green stands for first we gather, then we rank, then we evaluate, then we establish, and then we negotiate. And this is how you can approach gather, rank, establish, gather, rank, establish. Nope, gather, rank, evaluate, establish, and negotiate with all of your friends. This is the order in which I want you to approach looking at your friendships and relationships after loss, because not only is it organized, but it helps you kind of get this sense of groundedness and like you have a foundation to stand on before you start having conversations that could feel really risky or really vulnerable or really energy consuming as you grieve. So the first thing you want to do is gather. And what this means is I want you to just dump your brain out, make a list of everyone you interact with on a regular basis. This, in my current life, would be my wife, the person I live with, a handful of best friends who live nearby to me within a few blocks here in Chicago, my coworkers, a couple of people I talk to over Zoom every month that I would consider dear friends, and a couple of friends that are far and away, but we talk to each other on a pretty regular basis. Like, who's in the group chat with you? Who are you interacting with both in real life and in digital spaces on a regular basis? Or, said another way, who would you consider that you're close to right now? Most grieving people who do this exercise find themselves with a list of anywhere between, I'd say, like 5 and 30 people. So you could be extroverted, introverted. You could have a big workplace or a small workplace. You could work from home, for instance. You might be going to school right now, and so you might have a longer or a bigger list. Or you might be in some sort of religious or spiritual community where you interact with a lot of people, or like a hobby or a club or something like that. And so your list might be decently big. But basically, who do you see on a regular basis? And do those people know you're grieving? Those are people that belong on your list. The second thing that we're going to do is rank the people on this list. And this is not if they're bad or good or evil or moral or whatever the case may be, but it is you are ranking them based on how they respond to your grief. So I want you to draw like four columns on a piece of paper, three lines, four columns, and I'll show you this in a second, of green light people, which are people you feel supported by always or most of the time. Yellow light people, people you feel supported by sometimes. Like sometimes they're good at grief, and sometimes they throw me a curveball of like, ooh, that felt really judgmental, or ooh, they're trying to get me to see a bright side before I'm ready, or ooh, they're avoiding the conversation, and I know they're avoiding the conversation, and they might even know they're avoiding the conversation, and we're just sitting there staring at each other like two bumps on a log. Red light people are people you never ever feel supported by, who you might consider grief hostile or kind of grief haters. They don't really want you to be grieving at all, or they judge you for grieving, period. And then you could have, if you want to, like a question mark column, like people you don't know whether or not they would support you in grief. They may not know you've experienced a loss, or you've never talked about your loss before at all. After you kind of rank people in their respective columns, evaluate. People in your green light column, I would call your grief allies. And something I want you to consider before we talk about the people who are potentially harming you in grief, friends, family, coworkers, neighbors, consider how explicitly the people in the green light column, your grief allies, are approaching you and your grief. What about your relationship with them makes you feel safe or understood or heard or seen or loved or valued as you grieve? Write down what it is exactly that they do to help you feel like they are good allies to you in grief. And it's going to be different for every person. I'll show you some examples of this later of what it means to be a good grief ally and things, some things you might consider or write down, but they're going to be different for you because we all need different things or want different things from our friends and family when we're grieving. After you've done that, people in the yellow and red light columns, these people are either partially supportive or not supportive at all. And I'll show you a list of the 11 toxic grief tropes, which is a framework that I made up. List the grief tropes that a person embodies next to their name. So they might be a rose-colored reframer who always encourages you to see the bright side. They might be a judgmental jerk who judges you for how long you've been grieving, or it was just a dog, or it was just a miscarriage. They happen every day. Say cruel things like that. I will introduce you now to the 11 toxic grief tropes. Once again, the rose-colored reframer is somebody who always wants you to see the bright side. These are just keep calm and carry on, or good vibes only, or a door doesn't close without opening a window, or everything happens for a reason, or God needed another angel. They are people who are ready to see the bright side of everything and they want you to see it too. Domineering distractors are people who want to get you out of the house. They think that busyness and hobbies are the cure for grief, and frankly, they are not. They don't keep you healed. They keep you distracted. They keep you busy. They keep you exhausted. And when you're exhausted, you can't grieve. And that's like their secret sauce. And that is not a real math equation. It just makes you exhausted and grieving at the same time. Nuisance nurses and the toxic grief trope are people who try to heal your grief or cure your grief. Some grieving clients say these are the people who push like essential oils on you or like specific towels, or you just need to join Soul Cycle or whatever the case may be. I don't have anything against Soul Cycle, but like you just need to do XYZ and you will heal from your grief. You need to come on this retreat. You need to take warm baths more often. You need to try cold plunges. You got to go to the spa. They are always trying to recommend something to you, some oftentimes to heal your body in order to heal your grief. Judgmental jerks are people who judge you for grieving, whether it's how long you've been grieving, the fact that you're grieving at all, the person, the pet, or the loss that you're grieving in the first place. They got something to say about your grief. Obnoxious one-uppers are people who Megan Devine would call playing the suffering Olympics, where they're like, you think that's bad? I lost my husband and two children during the war, and I had to walk uphill in the snow both ways. So when you share your grief, they do not share their grief to connect with you. They share it to talk about how their loss is so much worse. And so suddenly grief turns into a competition. The emotional expressor is not a common one, but if you have one in your life, you know it. They start crying when you talk about your grief. And so suddenly the spotlight of who needs the support and who needs the help is no longer on you as the person who's grieving. It is on them, the person who cannot kind of contain the fact that they have a lot of hard and sad and bad feelings about your loss experience. And a lot of times you may turn into the person who's comforting and they're-thering them, even though you're the person who has experienced the devastating loss. This happens quite a lot to survivors of trauma or of micro and macro aggressions out in the world. Audacious assumers are people who think they know what you need. Oh, you just need to see this kind of person, or you just need to get a grip, or you just need to whatever. If their sentence often starts with, you just need to, they assume they know what you need. I'm going to drop a casserole by the house. I think you need to eat. Oh, we have enough casseroles. I'm going to drop it by anyway. They are kind of like the steamrollers of the 11 toxic grief tropes. They do not actually care what you need because they already have an agenda for what they think you need. Awkward avoiders are some of my favorites because I always think of them. They're not my favorites because this behavior is harmful, but they're my favorites because I think of these memes or these videos that popped up on YouTube when YouTube was still young on the internet. I am that old, of people taking videos of their dogs making messes of the house and then just looking the other way. I didn't do that. I didn't rip up the couch. I didn't do anything like that. Awkward avoiders will talk about anything but your grief. They'll talk about the weather. They'll talk about the Grammys. They're going to talk about what sports were on last night. They're going to talk about politics. They're going to talk about, did you see this thing that neighbor did? They're so willing to gossip with you about just about anything. They will not talk about your grief. They know your grief is in the room, but they are not looking at it. It's not their business. They don't want to talk about it for whatever reason, and they will change the subject if your grief comes up. Social media sympathizers, and I'm guilty of this one, you might be seeing yourself in some of these toxic grief tropes. This often comes up in these conversations, are people who will reach out on social media or say something in the comments, but often fail to follow up in real life. And so if you post a picture of you and your person after a death and say, you would have been 26 years old today, I miss you so much, they'll show up in the comments and say RIP, they were such a great person, whatever, and then you just never hear from them. They never send a text, they never send an email, they never call, they never show up at your door. There are people who reach out when it is visible to other people. A lot of people call this performative grief support, but they don't actually show up in any meaningful way in your life. Invasive interrogators, I have a relative who does this, and we'll talk about her in a second, are people who ask you a million nosy questions about your loss. And this gets worse when your loss is something tragic or accidental or violent. I'm thinking suicide, homicide, drug overdose, alcohol abuse, any sort of immigration trauma, racism, things of that nature, medical malpractice, or if your loss was somebody who is or was a public figure, or if you are a public figure, how did they die? Oh, were you the person who found the body? Uh, how far along were you before you miscarried? Or what breed were they? Maybe I won't get that same type of dog because that dog's gonna die too. Like they just ask the nosiest and meanest questions about your loss, whether they recognize they're doing it or they don't. They are an invasive interrogator. And the last one, this is actually the most common for all of my clients and students, is the disappointing disappearer. This is the person who maybe shows up for the funeral and then you never see or hear from them again. Maybe they're out there posting pictures on Instagram, social media. You know they're alive, but why aren't they talking to you? And it makes absolutely no sense as to why they have ghosted themselves from your lives. I remember talking to a client once in 2021 who was grieving her daughter's estrangement, but she was also grieving her mother's death. And she's like, my best friend for more than 20 years showed up to my mother's funeral and I never saw her again. I've sent her letters, I've sent text messages, I've reached out on social media, and I've never heard another peep. And the only thing that changed was my mom died. And I still don't understand why I lost this friend of more than 2 decades. She was a disappointing disappearer. So notice in each of these toxic grief tropes what themes show up in your yellow light and red light people, and we will get to classifying those in the next couple of steps here when I get to the example of how to work this in real life. Okay, once you've kind of established your yellow and red light people and which toxic grief tropes they're falling into, pick one. Just one person to start a conversation about grief support with. You can choose, doesn't matter, you can choose somebody in the yellow column who's like, sometimes they're supportive and sometimes they're not. So maybe I have a little bit of hope of repairing the relationship or they might be receptive to this conversation. Some grievers prefer to start with red light people because they're like, well, if they don't respond well, that's kind of expected and I'm okay losing them as a friend. So you kind of choose where you'd like to start with or who you'd like to start with. I tend to find that whoever pops first into your mind is probably the best person to start with. And to establish your boundary or to craft your boundary setting statement, you can follow the following steps. First, offer a greeting. Hi, friend. Two, set the scene. What exactly happened? How did they respond? Three, make a clear I statement about how their words or actions hurt you in the moment. Four, and this one is optional, you can elaborate on how their words and actions made you feel or how you received them. 5, to also optional, offer reassurance or understanding. I can see why you did that. It makes sense that you would do that. I know you were raised with these beliefs about grief, whatever the case may be. 6, provide a clear and preferred alternative. What would you rather they do instead or say instead? And close with love or appreciation, or if you're in a coworker setting, hope for repair. I hope we can fix this because I want to continue to be in some sort of relationship with you. The last thing I want you to do before you even send that text or send that email or have this phone call or get on Skype or whatever you're going to do with somebody is to create a game plan that's going to help you negotiate your future relationship and figure out or decide in advance, and this can help with a lot of the anxiety of setting boundaries with friends and family. What are you going to do if they respond well? What are you going to do if they respond poorly? And what are you going to do if they don't respond at all? And having those three things set in advance. If they respond well, I'm going to do this. If they respond poorly, I'm going to do this. If they don't respond at all, I'm going to do this. It's kind of like one of those Cosmo quizzes or BuzzFeed quizzes of like, if this, then that option. If this, turn to page 60 and then go on another choose your own adventure. But you are deciding what you have power over and what you have control over in advance, aka your responses to how they respond to your boundary. In addition, the last three things I want you to ask yourself is how can I take care of my mind, heart, body, and spirit after I set this boundary with this friend? What do I think I'm going to need right away? And what needs to happen next in order for me to feel safe, secure, or grounded in this moment? Because something that a lot of people don't acknowledge, especially people who talk about relationships and boundaries, I'm thinking on social media or in therapy practice or things that are not grief adjacent, is how much energy this takes. It takes energy to renegotiate the terms of a relationship with somebody, especially when you are already using so much of your precious energy to grieve. And so to pick a person, to script a boundary setting statement, to plan for the uncertain future of how they're going to respond, and then to take care of yourself in the aftermath, that's a lot of work when you're not grieving. And it's also a lot of work when you are grieving. And so to really take care of yourself in advance, to do a lot of this pre-planning so that when the moment unfolds, you're like, good, I've already thought of this. I know what I'm going to do. I know who I'm going to call for help. I know I'm going to lie down on the couch. I know I'm going to take a day off work. Whatever the case may be, you have planned it in advance. And so your brain, instead of spiraling, gets an opportunity to kind of take a back seat as you tend to yourself in the ways that you've planned already into the future. So let me give you an example. I know I've said a lot of words in your direction, but I want to give you an example of how I've actually used this green step-by-step method in my own life. So this is me gathering people. I have my wife, Heather, my best friend, Tammy, my best friend, Kim, my relative, my former boss, my ex-girlfriend, a family friend, and my landlord. These are people I interact with on a regular basis. I have shortened my list dramatically just for the purposes of demonstration, but kind of so you can see how I sort people, where everybody goes in each of my different columns. Then, in the ranking section, in my green light column, I would put my wife, Heather. I would put my best friend, Tammy, for sure. I would put my friend, Kim. These are all people who respond marvelously to my grief in many different ways, and we'll get to that in a second. Yellow light people, people who kind of sometimes respond well and sometimes don't respond well, are my relative that I'm thinking of right now, and a friend of my family. Red light people, people who do not respond well to my grief at all, and I cannot trust them with my pain, is my former boss, my boss at the time that I invented this practice, pardon me, and my ex-girlfriend, who I was still in touch with also at the time. Question mark column for me was my landlord. I don't anticipate ever getting close to my landlord about my grief experience, so he can just stay in the question mark column. I don't have any need to improve my grief relationship with him, so he can just stay over there. But sometimes, we have people who are adjacent to male people, people we garden with, maybe the barista at the coffee shop. It's like I interact with you on a regular basis, but you are a person who either doesn't know that I'm grieving or may not ever need to respond to my loss in a significant way. So that question mark column is helpful for people like that. Okay, here's where it gets interesting. In evaluating these relationships, I start with the green light people. These are your grief allies. These are my grief allies. My wife, Heather, she asks about my mom. She brings me food. She holds me when I cry, a lot more than I like to admit. She remembers. She's so good at remembering dates, my mom's birthday and death day. And she listens when I tell stories about my mom. My best friend Tammy, she asks about my mom. She brings me food, and sometimes we share food together. And she listens when I tell stories about my mom. And my friend Kim, who I consider my God friend, she asks about my mom. She helps me feel supported by God and the universe. And so as you kind of make lists of like, what is it that the people in my green light columns are doing well? Consider, are there some recurring themes? Because for me, there certainly are. I underlined all these in purple. I really, really like when people ask me about my mom. when I'm not the first person to bring her up in the room, but when other people remember that she existed, that she raised me, that I miss her, that she died, and ask me, oh, what would she think of this TV show? Or we're going out to this restaurant, what would she think of this? Or your sister said that thing last week, how would your mom respond to that? Or you're going through this in therapy right now, what would your mom think of how you're growing? Or you're coming out with a third book next year, what would your mom think about what you've written? And just continuing to bring my mom up in conversation, her inside jokes, her funny stories, and just remembering that she exists and being the first person to bring her up. I really, 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 really like when people do that. And this will come in handy later. Now we're going to look at the yellow and red light sections. So under the yellow light column, my relative I have determined is a rose-colored reframer. She is so ready to make meaning and look at bright sides before I am, and she asks the weirdest and most invasive questions about my loss. And it has been more than 12 years now, and she still asks weird and invasive questions about my loss. My family friend, kind of the same thing, rose-colored reframer, but then also social media sympathizer, like reaches out on social media, never in real life, tries to make meaning on social media, never in real life. And then red light column, my former boss was a rose-colored reframer as well, always looking on the bright side. There's a spiritual meaning to this. The universe has a plan for everything, blah, 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 barf, barf, barf. But also a nuisance nurse, pushed a lot of, essential oils and ayahuasca and come to this retreat, whatever. I'm like, you're my boss, lady. Anyway. And my ex-girlfriend was an emotional expresser. She would cry more than I would when I would talk about my grief, and suddenly the tables are turned and I'm comforting her. And I'm like, oh, this is not my goal in reaching out for support. So when you've got kind of your toxic grief tropes established for your yellow light and red light columns, once again, see if there's any patterns here. I underlined mine in purple. I really do not like when people try to cheer me up or make me feel better. That is the conclusion I drew. I was like, oh, a lot of people that I find hurtful or judgmental of my grief are people who keep trying to bright side or cheerlead me, and I am not interested in having that experience. And so now the next step is to pick who am I going to set the boundary with? And for this example, I want to talk about my former boss, or my boss at the time that I wrote this boundary. And so my boss, rose-colored reframer, I can think of a few different examples of when she tried to like nuisance nurse me at work, and this is what I'm going to be setting a boundary around. I know this is a lot of words for one page. Again, you're going to get the replay tomorrow, but I'm following the same structure of establishing a boundary. I'm offering a greeting, I'm setting the scene, I'm making a clear I statement about her words and how her actions hurt me. I'm elaborating on how she made me feel. I'm offering reassurance or understanding, or like, I can see how you are trying to be helpful, which is a very generous thing for you to do as a griever. I'm providing a clear and preferred alternative. And in this case, I'm actually saying, here's what I want you to do based on what I already know is helpful for me, what I know from my green light column people. And I am closing with love, appreciation, or hope for repair. So here's how I would write this message to a former boss. Hello, former boss. The other day when you told me to look on the bright side of my mom's death and recommend I start using lavender oil to sleep, I felt like you were assigning meaning to her death and trying to cure me of the heartache that I'm feeling. It made me feel like I'm not allowed to express pain about missing my mom at work and openly share how grief is impacting my sleep. I know you're just trying to make me feel better, and you can put in and that you have good intentions, but in the future, and here's my alternative, it would mean a lot to me if you could ask me how I feel about her being gone and ask for my permission before suggesting any remedies for my grief. I hope this is something you can do because I really do like working for you and I want to continue working together. So this is a very clear, I am kind, I am clear, I am saying this specific behavior is harmful to me. This is what I would rather you do instead, based on what I already know is helpful to me from other friends and family who are supportive. And closing with hope for repair. Like I want to go somewhere from here. I am attempting, I have heard once that people try and set boundaries with you because they want to continue a relationship, not because they want to end it. And so that is why I always recommend that you close with love, appreciation, or hope for repair. The flavor changes based on whether you're talking to your boss or a very close family member. But even prefacing your conversation with, I'm saying this because I want to continue a relationship, not because I want to end it. So I'm hoping that you can receive this with the care I'm intending it to. And then, even before I sent this, I considered, where am I going to set this boundary? Am I going to do it over the phone, text, email, letter, Zoom, in person? Consider how setting your boundary via a medium that you currently use to talk to this person allows them the time and space they may need to process your boundary. So I chose to send this over text. My boss and I texted a lot. And so this was the medium that I chose in this instance. Timing. Are they more of a morning person or night person? Do they have a big test or a big event coming up? Try your best to approach them at a reasonably calm time of day or week when they'll be open to receiving your vulnerability. Obviously, you can't predict everybody's life, just like they can't predict yours. But like, if you're like, I know they're getting married soon, or I know they're studying for the SATs, or whatever the case may be, maybe hold off or wait until the aftermath of that. Or if they're not a morning person, don't drop this in their lap first thing on a Monday morning. Consider as much as you can with the grace that you can and the compassion that I know lives in your heart to send a message like this at a time when they might most likely be willing or able to receive it. And then also consider their history. Do they have a background of responding well to boundaries? Hard stop. That's a good question to ask yourself before lobbing this into their inbox. If yes, proceed with optimistic caution. And if not, and this is your first time doing this, consider starting with somebody in your yellow light column who might have a better history of responding to boundaries in the past and kind of build up your tolerance for this kind of vulnerability or boundary setting. And then approach them later when you have more energy or capacity to process their response. And big asterisk down here at the bottom in yellow, whatever you do, do not refer to people as toxic grief tropes. Don't say you are being such a judgmental jerk. Don't say that to people. First off, they won't know what it means, other than you're calling them judgmental and a jerk. And second off, especially for things like emotional expressor, awkward avoider, rose-colored reframer, they will not know the context in which you are saying that. So to say things like, the other day, when you said, I can't believe it's been 6 months and he died and you're still this sad, that's something a judgmental jerk would do, but you're saying the behavior as opposed to the name of the toxic grief trope. So never ever refer to people as toxic grief tropes. It is not kind. It is simply a tool for your brain to help kind of diagnose like what type of pain exists in this relationship, what toxic trope lives here, and then you can come up with your own language of exactly what behavior or exactly what words they're using that feel harmful and hurtful to you. And then before I even sent this text to my boss, if she responds well, I'm going to thank her for being open and listening for what I need. If she responds badly, I'm going to stop discussing my mom's death at work. I might even start to look for another job. And if she doesn't respond at all, I will send a follow-up text in 24 hours just to see that she received it because technology is weird. Sometimes messages slip through the cracks. Sometimes people aren't checking their phone. Sometimes they're on do not disturb. Just to be like, hey, sent this. Just want to make sure you got it and just follow up there. I also made a plan to take care of myself. I will take care of my mind, heart, body, and spirit by going for a run to my favorite place. Running was a thing I did a lot after my mom died. I felt like I had too much energy to burn off. I had kind of the opposite experience of a lot of grievers. Many people are tired and exhausted after a loss, and I was like feeling jittery all the time. I was like, I need to give the grief somewhere to go. So going for runs was a thing that I did. I also said, I predict I'll need to be at home in the safety of a pile of blankets on the couch in order to send this text. Then maybe I'll go for a run afterwards. Or I'll need to call a friend from my grief allies list right away to reassure me that I did the right thing by setting this boundary. That will help me feel safe and grounded. So identifying how am I going to take care of myself? What do I predict I'll need? And what will help me feel safe and grounded are things that I did before I even tried setting the boundary with this boss. And the thing I want you to remember the most, and then we'll go to questions in the chat. So please put all of your thoughts, everything that's coming forward for you in the chat because I'd love to answer your questions, sort through specific strips or scenarios with you if that's something that's coming forward for you, talk about toxic grief tropes as they show up in your own life. So please start dumping things in the chat and then I'll kind of give my, this is a religious word, but benediction. The thing I want you to remember the most as you go through the green method and as you establish boundaries with people and renegotiate the terms of engagement of your relationship, now that grief is in the picture of your life, what I need you to know is that how they respond says more about them and what they believe about grief and how they thought life was supposed to go and your relationship was supposed to go, and less about you and what you know your needs to be. You are more than allowed as you move through the world to make reasonable requests of your friends and family members, and you are also allowed, you have so much permission to have new or different needs as a result of loss. Loss changes your life, but it also changes who you are and who you are able to be in relationship. Again, grief doesn't happen in a vacuum. It changes your entire terms of engagement with every single person in your life. And anyone who expects you to continually endure their hurtful form of quote unquote support is not a friend to you in grief. And you are not required to spend one more second of your time with them. A lot of times, grief and loss teaches us that time is really precious and fleeting, and something that I want you to hold on to. And this is not being extremist or cruel, but that you should not have to sit in somebody else's judgment of your grief or fixing of your grief or analyzing of your grief or critiquing of your grief just to maintain a relationship, because that is not a relationship for you. That is a friendship prison, and that is not a life that I want for you when you are grieving a devastating loss. You deserve friends that are kind and empathetic and open-hearted and supportive and who tell and share stories and who listen to yours and who really understand. And even if they don't understand, just acknowledge the weight and the impact that grief has in your world. That is the kind of friendship and that is the kind of relationship that you deserve. And last thing before we get to the chat, because I really want to hear what you all have to say, if you want more tools like this one and you're interested potentially in joining Life After Loss Academy, I have another free workshop that's pre-recorded so you can watch it just like this one. I'll drop the link in the chat. If you are watching the replay, it is shelbyforsythia.com, and then you can look in the top right-hand corner and it just says free workshop. Click on that button. You can watch it there. It's called Grow Through Grief, and it is my 3 free tools to help you stop feeling stuck and start moving forward. The safety first rule, 2 words to instant self-compassion, so you don't even need to have anything with you. It's just 2 words that change how you see yourself in grief and offer yourself more kindness as you grieve. And then the secret to living a good life with grief. And I always joke it's not kale or acai berry or any sort of superfood smoothie, but it is a change in perspective that has altered the life of every single client and student that I have ever worked with. And it is all available for free on my website. It's less than an hour, I think. But if you want to grab that recording, you can certainly do that on my website, and I will drop that link in the chat as well. That is what I have for you in terms of the green method, but I would love to take your questions. I would love to know how this is landing with you. Do you see yourself in the toxic grief tropes? Tell me more. Tell me more. Rachel says, this is so great. Unfortunately, I have to go. Looking forward to watching the rest via replay. Yes, absolutely. Christy says yes as well. I love it. I'm going to hang out for a little bit and just see if there's any other questions that pop up in the chat. I can tell you some stories from my own life and world as well. I'm going to grab this link really fast to pop in the chat if you're interested in the free workshop. shelbyforsythia.com/free-workshop. But yes, this is one of my all-time favorite things to teach. And earlier this year, I had the privilege of completing Megan Devine's grief professional certification course. And most of what she talked about working with clients who came into her therapy practice, people who are grieving, is the thing that's the most frustrating in grief is how their relationships have changed and how people in their life are responding to their grief. I was 21 when my mom died and went back to college, went back to school the semester after she died. She died the day after Christmas over winter break. And her biggest wish, her dying wish, was that I go back to school. And I didn't want to, but I did anyway. Some part of me regrets that. Some part of me is proud I did it, but water under the bridge. But most people's response to my grief, because they're all in their teens and 20s, is come to the party, just have a drink. And so they were distractors. They were domineering and distractors. Just stay busy, just distract yourself. And I kept trying to relay to people. I was like, I didn't get a bad grade on an exam. I'm not trying to like forget a test I failed. I'm trying to cope with the fact that my mom died. And coming to a party, drinking, throwing myself into my thesis, it didn't work for very long. And it was something that I quickly set down as a coping tool. And it was a voice, the domineering distractor friends. These were people I stopped listening to after a while because I didn't feel real connection or real friendship with them. I didn't feel like they were seeing me in my grief. I feel like they were prescribing something that they thought would work for them, because it did, for bad grade on a test or just went through a breakup in your 20s or something like that. But I wanted something deeper than that. And so the friends that I did end up making after my mom died within the first 6 months or so were people who had faced loss themselves. I fostered friendships with women in their 40s and their 50s who knew what loss was, whether divorce, whether diagnosis, whether death as well. And I found myself really gravitating towards, and I look back now and I'm like, huh, mother-like figures, but simply people who had been there before. And the only friends who really stayed with me that were in their 20s or 20 somethings were other people who had either experienced deaths or losses themselves and knew how to be there for me, or people who had already accompanied others through loss and death and applied the same sort of wisdom or same sort of tools, for lack of better phrasing, to me. And it was a very small group. It was less than five. I can count them on one hand. Um, and it really will. Grief will really take the snow globe of your life and shake it upside down. And when it settles, it is not in the same shape as it was before. Christy says, just curious, how did your former boss respond to your statement? Not well. So I had to, I'm laughing about it now, but at the time it was really devastating because what she responded with was, well, I had good intentions, or my intentions are good, or I'm coming from a pure place, or your mom would want you to XYZ. And she, I don't know a better way to phrase this, but like weaponized my mom's presence against me, or the belief that my mom lived on against me. And so I did end up actually quitting that job to begin doing grief work full time. And she and I have not really spoken since that time. There were a lot of other reasons that I left that job, communal, financial, social, a lot of other reasons that I won't get into here. But how she responded to my grief and how she spoke to me about my mom and who my mom would want me to be based on what she thought, were not things that I felt were kind or grounded in any sort of reality. And I'm like, I'm the daughter. I should be the expert here. You've known me what for 1 year, and I knew my mom for 21. So it was hard to find language for that at the time. And frankly, I was 22, 23 when I set this boundary, so it's pretty young. I'm 33 now. I just turned 33 in August. But I will say too, something that often comes, because I know we've got a little bit of time left, something that often comes from these workshops is the follow-up question of like, well, I feel like I'm losing a lot of friends, or I've already lost a lot of friends. What what do I look for in new friends? How do I go about making new friends? It's kind of like the PS that gets attached to this workshop. And something that I'll tell you is something that I actually talked about my therapist today, where I was working with a client many years ago, and she and her partner had gone through, it wasn't a divorce because they weren't married yet, but they were engaged and heading towards a wedding, and suddenly they went through a breakup, and I don't remember the circumstances of the breakup, but in the breakup, her ex essentially took all of their mutual friends with her. And so the client that I was working with, she was understandably devastated, not just by the breakup, but by the loss of all of these friends, and really felt that no one in the world was on her side. And she said, I feel like I am being pushed out of my circle, my own circle of friends. And this turned into a podcast episode of mine on Grief Seeds, which is a podcast I did in 2021. But I asked her to consider whether are you being ousted from a circle into a vast abyss of nothingness, which is a big story that we tell ourselves when we're grieving. Pardon me, I told myself this story too after my mom died, is I'm being cast out of my life before into a vast abyss of nothingness. You can believe that if you would like to, and sometimes it's helpful to believe that, and then sometimes we grow out of that belief. I said, or are you exiting one circle and crossing into like the middle of a Venn diagram and entering another much larger circle? One that actually has space and capacity for your grief. And so I started referring to this as the Venn diagram of grief because there's this myth that we're being pushed out of one circle, but what's really happening is that we are entering a space where we still have friends and family members, maybe a few left over from that old circle, but we are entering a much larger circle with friends, family members, people we haven't even met yet, helping professionals, body workers, spiritual teachers. I'm talking books, podcasts. I had so much help from people I'd never even met while I was grieving, and my new circle was built on that. You can call it chosen family, you can call it chosen grief support, whatever rings true for you. But that really changed her perspective on how she grieved. Is I am not being ousted from something into nothing. I am being ousted from the life I wanted to live and the the path that I thought I was on, but not to nowhere. I'm not wandering in the desert, for lack of better phrasing. I am on another path that includes some pieces of what I was before, but is also taking me somewhere I've never been. And that place ended up being better. It ended up being surrounded by people who really witnessed and acknowledged the depth of grief that comes with a breakup, which is not often acknowledged by our society, but also supported her through it and as her identity shifted and changed and literally helped her make music in this new season of her life. Christy says, I've heard the quote, your person would want you to. It makes me feel like, how would they know that, especially if they didn't really know my person who died? Yeah, I have never liked that one. I don't even really like when people say your mom would be so proud of you because I'm like, you didn't know her. Like, you don't actually know. I'm sure she would, but like, And I know that people have good intentions when they say that, but I talked about this recently on an episode of Grief Cohort, which is my free podcast about grief and loss. You can also find that on my website, shelbyforsythia.com. But like intention and impact are not the same. And as a person who supports grieving people, we are all people who are supporting grieving people, whether those grievers are ourselves or our children or our siblings or our parents, or our spouses or our coworkers. We are all grievers, but we are all supporting grieving people as well because we are never just grievers or just supporters. We are always kind of both at the same time. This is the topic of my third book. Of course, I'm here right now. Comes out in March of next year. Small plug for that. But intention is totally different from impact, and a lot of grieving people I know do not want to hear your person would be so proud of you, or they would want you to XYZ, especially if you did not know their person in life. Like how dare you put words in their dead mouth? Like how dare you make assumptions like that? And so to have a friend or a family member, well, more of a friend, like somebody who did not know them in life, say something like that is like, I appreciate what you're getting at. Like I can see how you would think that either based on what you know of the person or what I've told you of the person or what you believe to be true about them, but that doesn't resonate with me. And frankly, it feels insulting because I spent X number of years with her and I feel like I know her more. Instead of saying that, I would rather you just support me in the decisions that I'm already making without needing the overtone of your loved one would want you to XYZ. Or I would rather you support me in the emotions that I'm currently having instead of trying to make them something else or, yeah, steer me emotionally down another path. I really would love permission to be emotionally on the path that I'm on, even if you don't understand or agree with it. That's a great suggested alternative for somebody who's saying your loved one would want you to XYZ, your dad would want you to this, your brother would want you to this, your cousin would want you to this, your dog would want you to this, whatever the case may be. Yeah, that's a one that gets really prickly for a lot of grieving people because it's like you didn't know them. You weren't there. You weren't there to know them in life, so how could you possibly know them in death? I feel that for positive things, they would be so proud of you, and I feel that for negative things of they would want you to XYZ. And I'm like, don't tell me how to run my life based on what my metaphorical dead person would think. Like that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, absolutely. That's a really sticky one. I have been so heartwarmed. I don't know if that's a verb, but we're going to use it. I have been so heartwarmed in the past, though, by connections I have seen come from grief support groups. A lot of people are like, where do I find new friends in grief? And I'm like, have you tried a grief support group? Because oftentimes the ways in which we are wounded by friends and family members is specific to grief and loss. And so to enter spaces or places where grief or loss is already being talked about, and that's kind of the baseline is here's how we treat other people who are grieving, because we are all grieving here and we are all supporting here. It's a really great foundation for building friendships upon. And so whether you join a grief support group that is there to talk about grief, or a grief support group that's there to talk about something specific like alcoholism or suicide or baby loss or something of that nature, or we grieve and we knit, or we grieve and we make cocktails, or we grieve and we dine together. I'm thinking of the Dinner Party, which is a wonderful organization that encourages people, I think, in their 20s, 30s, and 40s to have potlucks with each other. And so you each bring a dish or there's like a theme of food for the night, and then you all gather around a table and you talk about grief, or death cafes, which are wonderful organizations for finding people in your area who are interested in talking about grief, loss, and death. Fantastic resources for beginning to make friends again in grief because the baseline of entering into those spaces is grief. And that might feel depressing to you, but I don't know about you, it feels very honest and authentic to me. And I think what a lot of grieving people say that they hate about moving in the world as a grieving person is that they feel like they're wearing a mask all the time. And it takes, talking about energy and your precious energy again, it takes energy to wear that mask and to perform being okay in a world where you are very much not. And so to walk into a room or to walk into a space and be able to drop a mask and have grief be the foundation of your interactions together is like, oh, what a relief. And it feels, or it can feel, a bit easier or softer or smoother to form friendship from that place, as opposed to walking into a yoga class or a rock climbing class or a pottery class or an art class or a dance class and not knowing who in the room is grieved or is a griever, not knowing who it's safe to bring it up with. And you're like, yeah, we're connecting about the merengue, but I don't know if we would connect about grief. And so in that sort of acute uncertainty of like who could be my friend and who could not be my friend, I often encourage people to reach for grief support groups as sources of new potential friends. And also, this is the last thing I'll say before we hop off for the night in case anybody, unless anybody has any other questions, which I'm so happy to answer in the chat because I love hearing from you. Um, Another way you can scout out who could be a good friend to you in grief is looking at your green light column and noticing what behaviors do you already appreciate from the people you consider grief allies? Do they ask about your person? Do they remember your grief dates? Do they enjoy eating with you? Do they like having deep conversations? A lot of people have said they're okay sitting in comfortable silence. Like that's a really good criteria for a friend. And kind of listing all these things of like, ah, in my life before, my criteria for a friend was, you know, they respond to text messages at a reasonable time. We do activities together. They remember my birthday. Um, we have some shared hobbies and interests. And now, after loss, I have all of that still, but I also want them to be comfy sitting in silence or want them to be cool with deeper existential conversations or don't rush to cheer me up or ask questions about my mom or remember her birthday or her death anniversary or all these other important dates to me or eat together or grieve together or talk about the state of the world or the state of losses. Like you kind of add to your criteria of like, you must be this tall to ride. You must meet these requirements in order to have a deep and meaningful friendship with me. And that's not you becoming more stingy or needy. It is you literally filtering for who can be a grief honoring person to you in this season of your life, who has the capacity to not just hold you as a person, but hold you as a grieving person. And that really matters when it comes to forming your relationships. And you can look for this in friend groups, in religious communities, in spiritual communities, in hobby communities, in school, if you're applying for school or if you're going to be a professor at a school, you can look for this in corporations. Do they offer paid bereavement leave? How long? What relationships qualify? That'll tell you if they appreciate grief in the workplace or not. Absolutely. Do they talk about the state of the world or how to help other people or what types of conversations you'll have while you are doing things side by side together at the cycling club? Like what is it that happens? The language that people use a lot of the time can also be related to, are they a safe place for grief? And you can sort of, as you go through your grief experience, have your ears perked for what sort of language people use in those sorts of spaces. And yeah, it's just curious to see how do your friendships change in the aftermath of loss? What parts of them change? What parts of them stay the same? Who comes? Who goes? Often, I know I had surprising supports for me after my mom died. The people who thought who I thought would show up, really didn't, or were kind of bad at it. And then the people who did show up, I was like, huh, that's a curveball. Didn't expect that one. But really appreciated and am grateful for their presence. And then who remained my friend in the years and the decades that followed was really curious or really interesting to me as well. That was um, unexpected. Another part of grief to contend with. The thing I want to say before we go is this does take time, this does take energy, this does take focus. And so if you are not ready to start setting boundaries tomorrow, please do not put that sort of pressure on yourself. Mark said these tools are very helpful. Thank you. You're very welcome. If you are not ready to use them tomorrow, don't. These are questions and frameworks. This green method framework is something that you can have and sit on and ponder for a while because many people who've attended this workshop in the past, they're like, I'm working through what is often called the SADMIN, the SAD administration of death, of paperwork and death certificates and emailing hospitals and medical bills and things of that nature. I do not have time to think about who my friends are right now and who my friends aren't right now because I am just doing my best to survive each day. Or, you know, I'm trying to sell a house after a loss, or I'm trying to go through the legal loopholes of signing divorce papers or things like that. And so if you're in a space in your life right now where friendships and relationships are not priority, it's okay. Come back to this whenever it feels appropriate for you. I trust that there will be a time or a season of your life where the dust will settle on whatever it is that you are working through right now. And you'll kind of like look up like a little meerkat popping out of the dirt and be like, okay, that's done. I'm kind of surveying the landscape. Now is the time for friendships. Now is the time for relationships. And they are sort of things, especially in the early days, that can feel like they take a backseat to things that feel more pressing and something that we can ask for or that we can hope for or that we can offer gratitude for in our friendships is thanks, man, for dealing with the fact that I've been offline for 3 months. I know I've no one's heard from me. I've been dealing with, this house and escrow or whatever. I don't know legal terms. But I've been dealing with all of the admin stuff and I've been way in over my head and I'm just coming up for air. How about we get coffee next week? That is something you can show an immense amount of gratitude for as you sort of re-enter the friendship and relationship pool of your life. So if you do not have the energy, time, space, ability to use these tools right now, today, know that I will not be the person to put that pressure on you. And if you are ready, the tools are here for you. And I'm so glad that you joined us in this workshop tonight. And I will say, if you'd like more scripts and tips for navigating life after loss, you can join us in Life After Loss Academy. It is a monthly membership. It's open year round. There is no like the doors are open and now the doors are closed and the doors are open and the doors are closed. Because when you're grieving, I mean, grieving people are grieving all the time. So I always want this to be open and available to you. And if you watch that free workshop, shelbyforsythia.com/free-workshop, there's a code at the end to join Life After Loss Academy free for 1 month. And this module called the Establish module, where I teach the green method and to also talk about how to craft an escape plan for when you're in public spaces surrounded by people and your grief is activated. How do you get out fast? How to write your pocket grief story. So if a stranger asks about your loss experience, a job interview, something of that nature, you have the words to say to them. We do that as well. And we also talk about how to tend to the garden of your grief, the metaphor of your grief. Who is in your most innermost circle of your garden? Who is on the outskirts of your garden? And who is outside of the fence? Like, what hard boundaries are you putting up to protect yourself from people who are unkind to you in grief and loss? We cover all of that in Life After Loss Academy and so much more. So if you're interested, please watch that free workshop. And you can get the code to try on Life After Loss Academy for 1 month free and see if you like it. And we do live calls very similar to this one that are coaching related, answering your questions, talking about your grief experience every Monday. And we alternate the time because we have folks in different time zones and different parts of the world who are joining us. We've got folks from the UK and the Czech Republic and the United States and Canada and kind of everywhere. As long as you speak English at a pretty decent level, it's open for you to join. So if you're interested in that, one more time, shelbyforsythia.com/free-workshop. I am so grateful to have shared space with all of you tonight, and I hope this was helpful to you. I wish you so much of everything. So much of everything is rushing to my brain. So much courage, so much vulnerability, so much care for yourself as you pick through and identify your different relationships and kind of decide which ones to tend, which ones to end, which ones to mend. Because this is so important and so significant when you're grieving to feel as if you are supported, and if you are not, to kind of set that down. If not forever, then just for this season, as you figure out how to turn inward and tend to your grieving self, because that requires so much of you. And I honor all of that within you. Yes, Christy says, thank you, Shelby. Aaron, thank you so much, Shelby. I'm so grateful to have been here tonight. And as always, you can find more of me and my work at shelbyforsythia.com. And I hope you will tune in for more workshops for Reimagine. It is an incredible organization, and there's so much free grief support offered there every single week. It truly boggles my mind, and I'm so grateful to be in partnership with them. Until next time we meet, I see you. I'm so proud of you and the work that you're doing in the world and in this workshop tonight. And I love you in whatever way that resonates with you, because even through grief, we are growing.